The mountain rain fell in heavy sheets as 32-year-old Jake Sullivan worked under the hood of the old red pickup truck, his weathered hands moving with the practiced efficiency of someone who had been fixing engines since he was 16. His flannel shirt hung open, providing little protection from the downpour, but Jake barely noticed the discomfort. When someone needed help on these remote mountain roads, especially during a storm like this, you did not stop to worry about staying dry. His 7-year-old son Tommy stood nearby, looking small but determined in his bright yellow rain jacket, holding a flashlight steady so his father could see the engine better. The boy had inherited Jake's serious brown eyes and his instinct to help others, even when it meant standing in the rain for 20 minutes while Dad worked on a stranger's broken-down vehicle. Jake had been driving home from his job at Peterson's auto shop when he spotted the disabled truck on the side of Highway 9, steam rising from its hood and hazard lights blinking weakly through the storm. In this part of rural Colorado, cell phone service was spotty at best, and the nearest town was 15 miles away. Jake had learned long ago that people looked out for each other in the mountains, because sometimes a stranger's willingness to stop and help was the difference between a minor inconvenience and a real emergency. The woman who owned the truck stood a few feet away, watching Jake work with an expression that seemed to combine gratitude with something else he could not quite identify. She appeared to be in her late 20s, with blonde hair that had been soaked by the rain and was now plastered against her head and shoulders. She wore a simple beige dress that clung to her figure and had obviously not been chosen for mountain weather, and she was shivering despite trying to maintain her composure. "I think I found your problem," Jake called out over the sound of the rain. "Your radiator hose has split completely. The engine overheated because all your coolant leaked out." The woman stepped closer, wrapping her arms around herself for warmth. "Can you fix it?" Jake looked at the damaged hose, then back at her concerned face. The repair would normally require a trip to the auto parts store and a proper replacement hose, but he had learned to be resourceful during his years working on vehicles in remote locations. "I can get you back on the road temporarily," Jake said, reaching into his toolbox for electrical tape and a section of rubber hose he always carried for emergencies. "This will not be a permanent fix, but it should hold long enough to get you to town where you can have it properly repaired." As Jake worked, Tommy moved closer to the woman, his natural friendliness overcoming any shyness about talking to strangers. "My dad can fix anything," he announced proudly. "He fixed Mrs. Peterson's washing machine last week, and Mr. Garcia's tractor, and even our neighbor's lawnmower that everyone said was hopeless." The woman smiled at Tommy, and Jake noticed that her whole face transformed when she smiled, becoming warmer and more approachable. "Your father must be very skilled. What is your name?" "Tommy Sullivan. And that is my dad, Jake. We live in Cedar Falls, about 10 miles from here. Dad owns his own shop, but he also works for Mr. Peterson because he says it is important to have steady income when you have a family to support." Jake felt his cheeks warm slightly at Tommy's matter-of-fact explanation of their financial situation, but the woman did not seem to judge them for it. Instead, she looked at Jake with what appeared to be increased respect. "My name is Sarah," she said to Tommy. "Sarah Mitchell. I am very grateful that you and your father stopped to help me." "Are you from around here?" Tommy asked with the innocent curiosity of childhood. "I do not recognize you, and Dad knows everyone in the valley." Sarah hesitated for a moment before answering. "I am staying at a farm about 5 miles up the road. I am helping with the harvest season." Jake glanced up from his work, noting something in Sarah's tone that suggested there was more to her story than she was sharing. But people in the mountains often had complicated reasons for being where they were, and he had learned not to pry into other people's business. "The Hendricks place?" Jake asked, recognizing the only working farm in that direction. "Old Henry and Martha are good people. They have been struggling since their son moved to Denver, though. I imagine they are grateful for the extra help." "Yes, they are wonderful people," Sarah agreed, and Jake could hear genuine affection in her voice. Jake finished his temporary repair and closed the hood of the truck. "Try starting her up now," he said to Sarah. "The engine should run without overheating, but you will want to keep an eye on the temperature gauge and get this properly fixed as soon as possible." Sarah climbed into the driver's seat and turned the key. The engine started smoothly, and Jake could see her shoulders relax with relief as she realized she would not be stranded on the mountain road. "How much do I owe you?" Sarah asked, reaching for what appeared to be an expensive purse that seemed oddly out of place with her simple dress and farm worker story. Jake shook his head immediately. Nothing. This is just neighbors helping neighbors. Besides, it was only a temporary fix using materials I had on hand. Sarah looked surprised by his refusal to accept payment. Are you sure? You spent your time and used your supplies, and you got soaked helping a complete stranger. I am sure, Jake said firmly. But if you want to do something in return, just promise me you will be careful driving in this weather. These mountain roads can be dangerous when they are wet. Tommy, who had been listening to the conversation, stepped forward with the innocent boldness that only children possess. Sarah, would you like to come to dinner at our house sometime? Dad makes really good spaghetti, and we have a puzzle we are working on that has 1,000 pieces. Jake felt mortified by his son's invitation, worried that Sarah would think they were trying to take advantage of her gratitude. Tommy, I am sure Sarah is very busy with her work at the farm. But Sarah was smiling again, and this time Jake could see something wistful in her expression. That sounds wonderful, Tommy. I would love to come to dinner and help with your puzzle. Jake looked at her in surprise. You do not have to accept just to be polite. I know Tommy can be pretty forward when he takes a liking to someone. I am not accepting to be polite, Sarah said, meeting Jake's eyes directly. I am accepting because it has been a long time since anyone invited me to dinner just because they wanted my company, not because they wanted something from me. There was something in the way she said it that made Jake wonder again about Sarah's real story, but her sincerity was unmistakable. Well then, how about this Saturday evening? Around 6 o'clock. Jake found himself saying, nothing fancy, just a home-cooked meal and good conversation. I would love that, Sarah replied. Can I bring anything? Just yourself, Jake said. And maybe a jacket. It can get chilly in the evenings this time of year. They exchanged information about where Jake lived, and Sarah promised to drive carefully and get her truck properly repaired. As she drove away, waving goodbye through the Rain Street window, Tommy looked up at his father with obvious satisfaction. I like her, Dad. She seems lonely, like she needs some friends. Jake ruffled his son's wet hair affectionately. You might be right about that, buddy. You have always been good at reading people. That Saturday evening, Sarah arrived at Jake's small but well-maintained house carrying a bottle of wine and wearing jeans and a sweater that made her look more relaxed than she had during their roadside encounter. She fit naturally into their evening routine, helping Jake finish preparing dinner while Tommy entertained her with stories about his school and his collection of interesting rocks. Over dinner, Jake learned that Sarah had grown up in the city but had always been drawn to rural life and farming. She spoke knowledgeably about agriculture and seemed genuinely interested in the challenges facing small mountain communities. What impressed Jake most was how naturally she interacted with Tommy, treating him as an intelligent person rather than talking down to him the way some adults did. Sarah, Tommy said as they were working on the jigsaw puzzle after dinner, how come you know so much about farming if you grew up in the city? Sarah was quiet for a moment, carefully placing a puzzle piece before answering. I studied agriculture in college, and I have always believed that farming is one of the most important jobs in the world. People who grow food and take care of the land are heroes, even if they do not always get recognized for it. Jake found himself increasingly drawn to Sarah's combination of intelligence, kindness, and genuine appreciation for the kind of work that he and his neighbors did. She did not seem to look down on his simple lifestyle or modest income, and she appeared to genuinely enjoy spending time with him and Tommy. Over the following weeks, Sarah became a regular visitor to their home. She helped Tommy with his homework, joined them for Saturday morning pancakes, and even assisted Jake with some mechanical projects around the house. Jake began to feel something he had not experienced since his wife died 3 years earlier, the possibility of building a life with someone who truly understood and valued the things that mattered to him. It was Tommy who accidentally discovered Sarah's secret. During one of her visits, her phone rang while she was helping with dishes, and she stepped outside to take the call. Tommy, who had been playing nearby, came running into the kitchen with excitement. Dad, I heard Sarah talking on the phone, and I think she might be famous or something. Someone called her Miss Wellington, and she was talking about board meetings and investments and stuff like that. Jake felt his stomach drop. Wellington was the name of one of the wealthiest families in the state, known for their business empire and philanthropic activities. If Sarah was a member of that family, it would explain her expensive purse, her knowledge about agriculture from an academic rather than practical perspective, and her comment about people wanting things from her. When Sarah returned to the kitchen, Jake struggled to act normally, but she seemed to sense that something had changed. "Jake, is everything all right? You look like you have seen a ghost." Jake looked at this woman he had been falling in love with and realized he had to know the truth. "Sarah, I need to ask you something directly, and I want you to be honest with me. Are you really working at the Hendricks farm, or is there something else you have not told us?" Sarah's face went pale, and she sank into one of the kitchen chairs. "How did you find out?" "It does not matter how. What matters is whether anything you have told us has been true." Sarah was quiet for a long moment, and Jake could see her struggling with how much to reveal. Finally, she looked up at him with tears in her eyes. "My real name is Sarah Wellington. My family owns Wellington Industries, and yes, we have a lot of money. But everything else I have told you is true. I did study agriculture in college. I am staying at the Hendricks farm, and I have been helping with the harvest. I came here because I wanted to understand farming from the ground up, not from boardroom reports and academic theories." Jake sat down across from her, trying to process this information. "Why did not you tell us who you were?" "Because of this," Sarah said, gesturing at the distance she could see growing between them. "Because the moment people know who my family is, everything changes. They either want something from me, or they decide I am too different from them to be a real friend. I have never had anyone care about me just for who I am as a person, the way you and Tommy do." Tommy, who had been listening from the doorway, stepped into the kitchen and climbed onto Sarah's lap. "I do not care if you are rich, Sarah. You still make the best grilled cheese sandwiches, and you always listen to my stories about school." Sarah hugged Tommy tightly, and Jake could see that her tears were a mixture of relief and fear about what this revelation might mean for their relationship. "Sarah," Jake said finally, "I do not care about your money. But I do care that you felt you had to lie to us. Trust is the most important thing in any relationship." "You are right," Sarah said. "I should have been honest from the beginning. I was scared, but that is not an excuse for deceiving people who have been nothing but kind to me." Over the following days, Jake and Sarah talked honestly about what her true identity meant for their relationship. Sarah explained that she had been trying to convince her family to invest more in sustainable agriculture and rural development, but she had wanted to understand the real challenges facing farmers before making her recommendations. "I do not want to be someone who makes decisions about rural communities from a boardroom in the city," Sarah explained. "I want to understand what people like the Hendricks really need, what would actually help small farmers succeed." Jake realized that Sarah's wealth did not change the qualities that had drawn him to her: her kindness, her intelligence, her genuine care for others, and her ability to see value in a simple life. If anything, the fact that she had chosen to spend her time learning about farming and building relationships with people like him and Tommy showed that her values were exactly what he had thought they were. 6 months later, Sarah used her family's resources to establish a foundation dedicated to supporting small mountain communities. Jake became one of her key advisors, helping her understand which projects would make the most difference for working families. And Tommy, now 8 years old, proudly told anyone who would listen that his new mom might be rich, but she was also the best puzzle solver and pancake flipper in the whole state of Colorado. Sometimes the most meaningful connections are formed when we see past surface appearances to recognize the heart of who someone really is. Jake had fallen in love with Sarah's character long before he knew about her bank account, and Sarah had found in Jake and Tommy the authentic family relationships that money could never buy.